Cubase Pro 9.5 is here, and I will give you guys a short review / opinions of all the different changes. So stay tuned. The first new feature that I want to talk about is the new Automation Lanse, and this is so much better. So this is what I had to do in the past to make this. I'd have to draw in points all like this and then just hope that it sounds nice and smooth. But now all I have to do is have 2 points and hover in between the 2 points, grab this middle section, and then drag a nice curve like this. Perfect. I'm happy with that. It's pretty much good. I would have to just audition and see how it sounds. And the other thing is when you hover over the point, you also have a point up here that you can click and drag, and then it creates it desegments just this range, and then you can change the value independently of the other automation here. So that's also a really handy feature that was, I think, very common, very easy to do in Pro Tools, and it's just a very common function that we would be doing with automation, and now they've implemented it very well. Now similarly is, let's say you want to turn up or down automation by a length of an event. So let's say just this section I want to quiet down the cut, or I want to lower the cutoff value. So what I can do is grab the range tool, double click on the event, and then click the down button, and you'll see the range tool moves here, and then I just have to grab the top, and now I can change that value up or down. If I wanted to do multiple events here, I could grab this by double clicking, then hold shift and double click any other range of events. Again, push the down button, and then I have my range selected, and I can go ahead and make some adjustments, and I can do it in the same way. You have these controls here. I can ramp it up on the far right side, left side. I can compress the data or expand the data. Same features as before, but with a lot more flexibility and way easier time to get a nice smooth curve, and way easier to do a range selection and then change the value just in that range linearly. So this is, 2 thumbs up and 2 wicked okay finger things. Very good job. The other thing is the coloring. They've also added like a highlighted color on the bottom of here, and this just makes it easier to see what the heck the automation is doing. It's purely visual, but it's so much easier at a glance to see what the automation is doing and what it looks like. From a production standpoint, it's, again, 2 thumbs up. Steinberg knows what they were doing. Next on my list is the addition of the control room and meter tabs in this right-hand section here. I like this a lot, actually, because the meter, oftentimes, just having it at a glance, let's say you're working on a laptop, having it on this screen without having to pop up the mixer window, or without having to pop up a new floating control room thing here with the meter in it, just having it embedded in here is really nice. Having the control room features embedded in here, same thing, very nice. And then also in this media tab, they have here, you have a favorites for one, so you can go and find favorites and just add to a favorites, and you can just very quickly go and browse it. And then they also have this file browser, which is exactly what you would see in your desktop explorers, is just direct access to your hard drives. So then you can go into your hard drives, and this is self-explanatory. It's, I think, a very logical next step of what they should have implemented. They probably should have done this much earlier, but now it's here, and it's so much easier to navigate and find the things that you want. Another big change, and many people were asking for this, is before they had 8 inserts, and it was not flexible as to which of the inserts would be pre-fader and which ones would be post-fader. It was always the first 6 that were pre-fader and the last 2 were post-fader. Now there's actually 16 insert slots, and then this little green slider thing, you can hover over it and drag it, and this is dividing which ones are pre and post. This is actually way better of a way to implement this than what I was imagining. I was thinking that what you would do is for each individual slot you would have to click a button to change it from pre to post. I think they did that with the sends on the channels here. You can go, I think there was a little button that you could push to do pre or post send. I think that's maybe when they have an actual, yeah, here we go. So pre and post fader. I thought they were going to do something like that, but this actually saves a lot of time, and it's just so much more straightforward. You just drag it, boom, pre-fader, post-fader, boom, done. Another cool change or another feature is in the preferences. In this section here, user interface, there's a new color schemes area. So the stock Cubase colors look like this. I'm actually, it looks good, but I like to have a slightly browner, dark tone to it, and it was actually super easy to find something like that. Click OK, and then the entire color scheme changes. It keeps the relative shading and color values of within all of Cubase, and then it just changes it with one color selection. So much easier, so much faster to get a color that you want, because before you had to go into the custom colors and actually select the single color one by one and then try and make something look good. It was kind of difficult, but I chose a darker color, slightly on the browner side, or gray brown or whatever, and I liked it, and it took me like seriously like 5 to 10 seconds to find a color, try it. Oh sweet, yeah, that looks good, done. And then you can go ahead and store your preferences here. And while I have this open, I'll mention that some of these things were like reorganized a little bit. So there's a little like there's this extra user interface section. The colors used to be up here, but now there's a user interface. There's a few other changes in there. The other thing is on the top here, the menu. This studio, this used to be called Studio Setup or something? No, what was it? Devices. It was called Devices. And this whole menu wasn't organized like it is here. Right now they have it all segregated in groups and all divided. And some of these things like audio hardware setup, that used to be there, but it was somewhere in the non-segregated list. And here you have more options, etc. The next feature that I want to talk about is the new metronome settings. So in the bottom right hand corner here, you can see you can drag this thing out, and this thing here allows you to configure the click patterns for any given, and actually you can configure, when you open this up you'll see here in the click patterns, is for each time signature value. Look at all these different ones, 12/8, 9/8. For each one of these time signatures, you can have a very specific setting for how you want the metronome to sound. This seems maybe weird and arbitrary unless you're a producer and you're working with a drummer or whatever else, but essentially you get to configure what the metronome sounds like. You can make it sound a lot more like the drum groove that the drummer's trying to record. So you can match that metronome setting to sound like a groove that he's trying to play, and it makes the recording that much easier. You can also go ahead and select the pitch, the level in 4 different increments. You can also select a variety of different preset sounds. So let's say you want the woodblock sound instead of the Cubase click sound. Maybe that's what the drummer or whoever prefers. You can also go and upload your own sounds. So when this is selected, it's the standard click. You can also go and create custom sounds and import them into Cubase, and then have different level, 4 different velocity levels. And then when you go ahead to this area, you can select from those 4 different velocities. Then when you're playing the click, you can see it's now following what I've configured. It's a great production tool, recording tool for the recording part of it. You also have easy access to just adding more clicks. You also have easy access to just half tempo, double tempo. Let's play this. Default setting, you can go back into the patterns part. Let's say you made something, made some changes, and you removed some of these. You can just reset the factory presets like this. And in the sounds, you can see everything's back to factory stock. So this is actually something that I was not asking for, but now that they've implemented it, I'm thinking back to several times where people had told me, can you double the click or half the click, or create some kind of like shaker pattern, or even change the sounds. And before in Cubase it was very difficult. Usually, let's say the half time or double time, you would actually have to go and change the metronome to twice or half the value. But I don't want to change the BPMs to an unnatural tempo. I want to keep that BPM constant and then just change the metronome settings. And this makes it so much easier. The next set of changes is the visual overhaul of the tube compressor, the vintage compressor, and the Magneto 2. And overall they look a lot nicer, a lot more modern. And they also added a mixed dry knob on the compressors here, as well as the standard Cubase compressor. So this allows you to have easy access to parallel compression. So let's have a listen of what each one of these plugins can do as far as their sound. That sounds actually really good. I haven't played around with Magneto, the old version, for quite some time. I usually use the Kramer tape and the J32, but this is actually nice and simple, and it's pretty easy to dial in a nice little saturation noise and get rid of some of the low-end boominess, and it's giving tons of saturation to this drum loop. So you can hear it's like very clunky and low end heavy, and the top end is maybe not so present and in your face. And this here, it almost sounds like it's EQ'd and compressed. It's done quite a bit to it. So the next feature is called Direct Offline Processing, and you can access it by going to Audio and Direct Offline Processing, or hitting F7 on your keyboard. and it opens up this window here. And this thing is actually really awesome, and it'll probably save a lot of people a lot of CPU. And what you can do is select a single event and then add a number of processes and plug-in processes to that single event, and you can make changes in real time. It'll visually represent it here. So let me just kind of demonstrate. You can go ahead and, let's say, reverse this and then do a fade in of some kind, and then I can go and add, let's say, a reverb like Roomworks, and with the auto apply ticked, I can go ahead and make changes kind of on the fly, and then it'll update visually on the event what it's doing. So you can see how it understands and then visually represents it automatically. Alternatively, you can make a change and audition it, and then when you're happy with your results, then you can apply it. I think auto apply for me is the best option because I can visually inspect and do this all kind of in real time. And two awesome things about this is, first of all, now you can just reorder these processes and then it updates it, and then you can remove one, let's say that fade in, don't want it anymore. You can dynamically go through all these things. Oh, what did oops, I deleted the reverb. Let's go to the fade in, delete that, then reorder the reverse, etc., etc. Much more flexible than the old way of doing things, where you had to just commit to one process or one plugin process, and then it wasn't even visually showing what the change was. Also, this stays on the actual event, so I click on another event, you see there's nothing. It's not that it goes away and it's processed, it stays there, and I can go back and I can change it again. And so yeah, this is going to be a really handy tool for, I think, especially production, where you want to do, let's say I want to reverse one of these snare drums, and I'll go in here, process, reverse, and let's say I wanted to also add reverb, reverse it again and have like that swell effect. Then it'll always be tied to the event itself, not to the track. So I don't have to insert anything on the track. I don't have to bounce it down and reverse it and bounce. It's so much easier to do it this way. So that's also actually a feature that I didn't submit to the 9.5 requests video that I made, but I should have, because now that I see the power that this one extra feature adds, I'm going to be using this a lot. Another significant change, although it's kind of small, is the addition of adapt to zoom. So normally when you have the snap to grid and whatnot, you can snap it to the bar. So here it's only going to snap to the bars. You can also snap to the beats, which are the individual quarter divisions, in this case, of the beats. So it'll snap to those. Or you can use the quantize and set a specific amount. So here it'll snap to the 16ths. But with the adapt to zoom, right now I can see that there's 16ths in the grid. So now it's going to snap to 16ths. If I zoom out, now I only see quarter notes, and it's going to it's going to snap or quantize to those quarter notes, and so on and so forth. So that's a really neat feature. I think other DAWs have already done this, and it's awesome to see that Cubase now has that feature. There's also a new synth in town for the Halion Sonic SE. When you load in the instruments, you'll see now this Flux, which is a wavetable synth, and this thing has it's a very specific sound that you can't get with many other synthesizers, and it does that by wavetable synthesis. I can't explain it very well, so I'm just going to jump to the the good stuff, is it has the ability to have this very evolving sounds and very, I want to say kind of pad-like unnatural sounds, but I'll give a demonstration here. So if you're familiar with like analog synths and other typical digital synths, that full range of sounds would be very difficult to emulate. But with this, because of the flexibility of the wavetable synthesis, you can do all these crazy evolving sounds very easily. This is something I think I'll start using because of the pad like this thing here. The pad that I just played is, I just loaded a preset and then played and tweaked a few knobs, and it was so evolving sounding that I think it's well worth trying to implement into a song of mine. So that's a cool addition. I think many people will like that, having more things to play around with. The sampler track also has some new features, and the most notable one is the fact that you can now drag and drop MIDI events into the sampler area, and Cubase will process that audio or whatever, the resulting audio, and import that into the sampler track. And that actually created a new sampler track here. I can now go ahead and start playing around with what I've just processed from the MIDI, and that MIDI was attached to a virtual instrument, so it processed from that. Let's say I had an external instrument and did that, and the MIDI was triggering the external instrument. I would have to have everything running with the inputs functioning, and then it would process it in that way. But either way, yeah, no, it's really handy. And then you also have an A and B tab, so you can experiment with the sound in one, go to the next A-B setting, go back to your original sound, and vice versa, and then just keep messing around, and you always have two different sounds to switch between. So really handy, I think, for the exploring, experimenting phase of music making. I think it'll be a good addition for my workflow. The next feature that I'll talk about is the 64-bit mixing engine, and this is going to be a little bit difficult to explain, but I'll try my best. So if you go into Studio and Studio Setup, in the VST Audio System tab, this is where you get to select between 32-bit and 64-bit processing. Now, I think I'll try and explain in layman terms, is that 32-bit is going to have less CPU usage, 64-bit will have more. But 64-bit obviously has some advantages. And the first thing is that it provides more headroom, more digital headroom for the specific channel and for the specific VST plugin, as long as it's a VST3 plugin, because those are the ones that now have 64-bit operation. VST2 or any other older version doesn't go up to 64. So I'll pull up the mixer and try and explain more or less what I'm talking about. Each individual track, let's say I have this track here, and this audio is going into my studio monitors, which is my main output, my master bus, which then gets exported as audio. If this audio source goes above the 0 mark, it's technically clipping. But within Cubase, what I can do is, even though it's passing the clipping point in this single track, it's being routed to this master output bus or master output track, And if I turn down the volume on this, it should compensate for that clipping, and then as a result, there won't actually be any clipping in the exported audio. But this is only true because there's enough headroom in that track to allow for there to be no digital clipping in the exported audio source. Going from a 32-bit to a 64-bit is increasing that headroom for, I think, for the overall mixer summing, internal summing and whatnot for Cubase, but also for the VST3 plugins. So just like the tracks and the channels, each individual plugin has a clipping point, and any time that it actually digitally clips, it goes over that mark, it's going to introduce digital distortion, digital clipping noises. But with a higher bit depth, it's going to reduce that amount of distortion added, digital clipping distortion, and whatever else goes along with it. So having the 64-bit is going to, in the end, sound more, I guess you can call it transparent, because there will be less overall instances and less amount of digital clipping noises introduced whenever that kind of stuff occurs, whenever you cross that sort of zero clipping point. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of difficult to explain, and I don't fully know the ins and outs, but that's my understanding of it. And lastly, there's a couple more things to mention. If you have a soft tube Console 1 controller, Cubase now supports that. I think it's in the early parts of 2018 they said they were going to have like a full working support. Also, there's more production presets, I think, in general for the effects chains presets and whatnot. And also, I think there's a brand new video engine. So there's maybe even more new features that I haven't mentioned, but the ones that I've covered are the most significant and the things that I find matter to most people and are worth mentioning. This update to Cubase has a lot of maybe smaller workflow features that were, I think, quite significant. So the automation lane is the big one. The adding some meters embedded within the window is good. The what else do we got? The 64-bit mixing engine, the new metronome, the addition of the inserts. There's more inserts. It's way easier to configure the pre and post inserts. There's the direct offline processing. That's a huge one. There's a new synth I think I'll probably start using. There's the adapt to zoom feature. There's the sampler track enhancements. So many like small things that to me make quite a big difference. And I live in Canada, so I think the upgrade was about $76 Canadian, going from 9 to 9.5, and that's actually a pretty reasonable upgrade price, because I think other versions were somewhere around like 80 or sometimes 120 Canadian dollars to upgrade. So very fair price for all those workflow enhancements. I think is unquestionably, I just bit the bullet because it made sense. There's just one more thing that I would mention, is that there are a few small bugs that I've noticed. Nothing major at all, but it's mostly just like visual things. So when I'm, let's say, for example, I'm using this controller to scroll through my different tracks, and you can see it's not visually representing it in the way that it should. Not a big deal. If you click on the tracks, it goes back to normal. The other thing that I noticed is when I was adding or removing some things here to the controller configuration window thing, these would turn white and it would just do something visually weird. But again, not a big deal. It would correct itself, and as long as you knew what you selected, then that's fine. Once Steinberg introduces the patch updates, I'm sure they'll have one within the next couple months, and it'll probably fix all these visual issues, and there's probably other issues that people will find out, some small little issues, and they'll hopefully be fixed pretty quickly. So that is it for this video. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of all these new features and what you think they may have missed, what you'd like to see in Cubase 10. And thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.